And just like that, we're back with another Lean Into Artcast, the show where a couple of visual storytellers get together, take a walk around a perilous topic, and hopefully walk home with a few takeaways, healthy tips, ways to engage with the topic after thinking about it very hard. My name is Jersey Drost, cartoonist and teaching artist. The other host is...
Hey, I'm Rob Stenzinger. I design video games and user experiences and such.
And joining us this week, or this episode, returning to the show, oh my gosh, has it really been 5 episodes since we've seen her? Casey Van Heis.
Hi, everybody. It's been too long.
That's awesome.
It's been too long. Let's do this every week. wintersinlavelle.com. One of the best comics you're likely to read on the internets. One of my favorite comics on the internets, actually. Which is, what is it? It's fantasy anime, isn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah. Bunch of pretty boys running around in a fantasy world. Some magical girl stuff. I feel like that's a little misleading, but I'm like, it's a girl with magic, so I guess that counts.
Yeah, but it's a girl with magic embedded in her throat.
yeah, it's got a little bit of an amber thing. It's kind of stuck there.
And it really fun characters and fun fantasy world, and it's what I would forgive me, Casey, if I would say it is comics for a post Sailor Moon world.
I think that sounds good. It is definitely
we were talking about this a little bit.
Yeah. In a post Sailor Moon society, which you can watch it on Hulu now if you have Hulu Plus. But yeah, I think it's definitely I count myself among one of the creators that is in the Sailor Moon generation. I think they call it. People like Rebecca Sugar on Steven Universe and oh my goodness, Bee and Puppy Cat. I'm Terrible, Natasha Allegri, and so there are a lot of people who are coming up, and you can see the influences, and I like to think I'm one of them. So
we'll have to do that as a full episode topic, but as when we were talking about it via email, you were like, make sure we get Megan Brennan for that one too. So yes, we will.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But you also do another comic with a collaborator called Parasite Nights.
Yes.
CITE.
Yes. Parasite, kind of like a it's sort of a pun. It's a crystal. The parasite is a mineral that's taking over the earth, and it's a post-apocalyptic society where these bands of knights riding around on motorcycles have to fight crystal monsters. So that is a little bit different. Very different art. My best friend Lindsay Woods, aka Avia, is drawing it, and it's gorgeous. And I can say that because I'm not the artist. So we've been working on that together. We are actually right on the cusp of finishing chapter 1, so we'll be putting that into print very shortly. So,
wow, great. So we will link to these in the show notes so people can go and read them, and you should read them. Okay, but we got a system for going through this episode. We're going to be talking about this week. We're going to talk about, as people, if they've downloaded it after the fact, if they're looking at the Google Hangout, they know what the topic is, plotting through your comic, coming up with the through line or plot or general direction of the story of their comic, coming up with it and then navigating it once it's underway. But before we go to that, we got a system. We have to warm up intellectually, and our intellectual warm-up exercise is called the Curveball. And Rob, I'm not even going to give you a chance to offer Curveball because I've got one that I'm just dying to throw at both of you guys.
Ooh, it's a fastball curveball.
Yeah, it's like quick draw curveball.
There's not much curve to. Well, maybe there is a little bit of curve to this, but it's not one of those like. I'm not giving myself a little Burger King crown for cleverness on this one. But it's something that I think is interesting because I think both of you guys can give me very different points of view and different perspectives or approaches as to answering this question for me. What is the deal with Attack on Titan?
Yes!
That's my curveball. What is the deal with the show?
Rob, I'm gonna let you go first because it's a little fresher in your mind.
What's funny is I feel like I'm the neophyte in this whole thing because I remember being immensely entertained and I mean I watched Attack on Titan because of your tweets about it, Casey. So
Oh, thank you.
yeah, I mean, I was
I'm
like,
glad you liked.
I was just curious. I'm like, when, and you know, I'm like, I often in casual conversation, I'll mention I have an entertainment deficit, and I would imagine anyone who has listened to the show for a while, when Jersey would ask, "Hey Rob, have you seen movie blah blah blah?" and I often almost always go, "Nope." And but at the same time, I've got a little anime collection, and I'll get around to it from time to time, and you know, it's been a while, and I'm someone who was super addicted to Dragon Ball Z at one time. And so there's the serial entertainment aspect. I appreciate different bundlings of stories, and I didn't even know which was Attack on Titan one big standalone thing. What was it? I have no idea. But you know what? Someone who is an aficionado of anime is like talking it up in a just like it was like it attached to your brainstem perhaps, and helped you with channel energy into your tweets maybe, but like. Anyway, so whatever. Finally got around to it, and I got through a few episodes, whatever. And your question was was Jersey like, well, what's the deal with it? It doesn't take any time at all to understand the deal with it if you have this this urge to tap into the sort of emotional pull in textured layers that anime can do when they're hitting you with music and multiple types of symbolic, how they're layering the visual communication and like showing the intensity of what the characters are going through. And the circumstance for this intensity is essentially these giant humanoids are attacking what seems to be the last bastion of humanity, which is in this walled, the series of walled, the citadel, this final city kind of thing. And you feel this sort of roughly steampunk era society's plight, where they've had a 100-year break from this, and all of a sudden now they don't have a break, and the odds are way against them, and so there's a lot of can humanity adapt and overcome this horrific circumstance put into the sort of like hyper intense storytelling style that can be at times be embraced by anime. Anyway, so it's a drug, and I got super high. That's
Yeah, definitely. No, I completely agree with all of those points. There are a lot of things, both in story and kind of on a meta level, that I really appreciate about it. I really like the sense of complete hopelessness that it starts with. It's really good at giving this really oppressing sense of like they don't really have a chance. So when things actually go well, you're punching the air and you're shouting, and it's pretty great. It does a really good job of presenting mystery in a lot of ways. There are things that happen that are kind of surprising. The anime unfortunately didn't get to a lot of them. There are some real curveballs later that come up. I'm hoping they do. I'm sure they'll do a season 2 once the manga catches up a bit. But there are a lot of things. There are a lot of really great, strong female characters in it too, and that's one of my favorite things about it. The Jaeger Corps, the soldiers, are completely egalitarian. They wear the same uniforms. There's no weird low-cut lady version. The strongest soldier in the series is a woman. The strongest of the new recruits is a woman, and there are a lot of really strong female characters. And they're not afraid to be feminine either. They run around in skirts when they're off duty, and it's not a big deal.
So nobody ever says the line, "You can't do that. You're a girl."
Yeah. Mikasa is pretty much just taking everybody else to school, so it's pretty great. I think there are just a lot of really interesting characters. On the manga level, I really like that Isayama's art is rough. If you've seen it, it gets made fun of a lot. I don't like that about that. He is not a very polished artist, but he's a great storyteller, and I think it's really great that he has been able to become so accomplished as somebody who, he draws tiny hands sometimes, but he tells a good story, and that's really what matters in comics. And it's the first time that I've really felt like that's kind of come through with somebody. Because, a lot of people will say, oh, well, the story is more important than the art. But then you look at the type of stuff they're recommending and they're like, do you really think that? Or do you think it's just kind of a nice thing to have on the side? So this is one of the times where I was like, okay, the story is what's important here. This book is selling 10 million units in Japan every time a new one comes out. It's selling, oh, what was the number here? It was like 300,000 units here, which is unprecedented. I think for the entirety of the series, it was something like that. But it was some bananas number. So I think it's really cool that it's really kind of taken off, and it's not stopping anybody from enjoying the story. So I think that's important, kind of from a creator's perspective too, to look at.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from you guys in your language is things like tone. This is something that's really present in there, but then also severe highs and lows, right? Like the lows of the dreadful tone, punctuated by heroes' successes, which bring in the highs, right? I want to dog ear that because I've got a feeling that's going to figure into our larger conversation today.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I threw that at you guys, and this is where I get to go. Look, oh, so clever am I? It's like, thinking about how to plot our stories. One of the things we talked about in the last episode was look at the stuff you like, and use that as food for thought and fuel for thought. Right. So, are we ready to get to topic then? Oh, by the way, I should say there's a reason I haven't watched Attack on Titan. It's because I think most of my friends warned me against it.
It's there are horror. Oops, we might have lost Jersey.
No, I'm here.
No, you're here. Okay, good.
Okay.
I mean, there are horrific aspects of it. I mean, it would definitely be like a rated R sort of thing in the American movie rating system. But at the same time, it's I mean, it's more than just genre tropes and jump scares kind of things. It's very textured, and I think there's a lot of great exploration of the theme through the different characters. It's just not one-sided. There's people who think a lot. There's people who are super visceral. There's people who are very emotional. There's people who aren't emotional. It's just neat. A lot of different ways to explore their theme. So it's great storytelling, but it's definitely hitting your lizard brain hard. It's like Gallagher's whacking your lizard brain.
All right. Well, there's our first recommendation is Attack on Titan, but there is some horrific stuff in the story. So, all right. With that, I think it's time that we hit over to topic, and I'll break out the old sound bank for Casey. Going 10,000 feet up. Think about the topic in abstract. Looking at it from every conceivable angle to see if we can find some new hidden dimensions to the thing. And what is the topic? The topic is plotting your comic. I want to start out by saying for me personally, I'm operating under an assumption that for the imaginary person we're going to be talking about here, who may be us, it's somebody who has a general premise in mind, a premise and maybe even a hook in mind. But then, so like these characters have legs. This premise is really exciting. I'm super excited about this idea. Now, how do I turn it into a thing? How do I turn it into something that I can make pages out of? And I think, Casey, during your discussion with us 5 episodes ago in episode 97, or was that 6 episodes ago now? Yeah, 6. We talked a little bit about this idea of like the difference between like writing ahead and then writing as you go along, and kind of very briefly touched on like the strengths and weaknesses of both. But that's one of the things I want to dig at today is like, when you write ahead or when you improvise, what parts do you improvise? When this was one of the big ones that Casey in the notes, you said, "Oh my God, this is my life." A simple question: how do we identify, how do we know when we are procrastinating through planning? This is something I struggle with a lot. Every project, whether I'm working professionally or not, I'll think I got to line up everything. I got to line up all my reference material. I got to line up all my notes. I got to really polish this thing, quote unquote. So there's a lot to dig at here. So I don't know where Rob, do you have a sense of where we should start with this, or do you want me to try to find a place?
Well, let's see. So we can think about, framing it up. I think there's different strategies to go about. Like, let's maybe we could start at that gestation point of let's lay out some scenario and talk about what it's like for each of us when we're starting out a story, and what kind of strategy do we try to embrace when we're starting out.
So case, like you had this thing in school called Winters and Lavelle.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to say I can actually kind of talk to that really personally now because I'm in the process of starting 2 other stories. I just finished outlining. One of the reasons I haven't been updating Lavelle much recently, I'm writing a game right now called Hustle Cat. Should be out sooner or later. Whenever I finish writing it, basically. But I went through the process of fully outlining that, and I'm working on a collaborative project with a friend of mine that we'll be putting out soon as well, and we've kind of worked it out. And so I've been pretty familiar, I think, with the idea of getting a premise together and turning it into something a little more concrete. And trying to think, I feel like I've done this enough. This is, I think, about 4 or 5 different stories I've started overall, if you count like Lavelle, Parasite Nights, the Hustle Cat, and this project and a future project. I feel like it's kind of come to a process where I understand what I'm doing now in terms of how I go about it. And usually I start with the premise and then move on to characters. So I don't know if that works for everybody, but it's the kind of thing where you want to get the foundations together, and then you can kind of go from there. Like I improvise less than I used to, but or maybe I think I improvise in a different way than I used to. I think I used to leave more of it open, but now I know to set up the tent poles I need, and then I can kind of just work from there. So it's a little bit of both, but I've moved more towards structure than chaos than I used to be, I think.
Explain what you mean by premise. Like when you say, can you give me an example of what a premise might look like on a piece of paper in front of you?
Okay. So Hustle Cat would be a good example. It started as a joke where I wanted to do a dating sim where you played and dated waiters from a cat cafe, and that was my premise. So I am super serious. This is what I am writing right now. So I just took that and I was like, okay, so what can I do with this? And you build it out from there. You say, what kind of characters would be in this story? What can I do? Like, what kind of twist can you put on this? It's the high concept elevator pitch, I think, can be a good place to start. And then you think, well, what can I do to make this mine? It's interesting that you started with Attack on Titan because the elevator pitch for Titan is the same as the elevator pitch for Parasite Nights. It's a group of soldiers fighting against a hopeless monster threat that's destroying the entire world. So you can kind of take that essence and grab it and run in whatever direction you need. And you build in the basic building blocks of that, and then you'll see it kind of build into something that you can sort of see more natural progression from that point forward. So,
is that where the characters come in? I mean, is that once you've got that basic idea, then when you start generating the characters, that's where some of the new surprises come in?
Yeah, I think so. Character is always a really important part to me in writing because when I get stuck on what I want to happen, I can rely on a really solid knowledge base of the characters to think of what they would do in that situation. So you can say, okay, well, this just happened. How would this character react to that? Okay, that's an interesting reaction. What can I do with this? How can we run with it? So it kind of informs itself, and I'm personally more interested in that informing the plot that I am the plot informing the characters, because it's helped me so far with everything I've written, and that's just kind of how it's come down. I've tried to do things that are more strongly plot-based first and then develop the characters after, but I never like those as much. They just don't feel as natural to me, I think. So it's I don't know. It's kind of a process where you can take those as the stepping stones and kind of move along the way.
It sounds like you progressed through like an initial strategy. Maybe you use that more in writing Winters and Lavelle.
Mm-hmm.
Going from what I'm hearing is maybe adding just a little more formality to get those reliable like a reliable toolbox of essentially the like characters might represent perspectives in the story that help you deliver upon that core that premise, the commitment, that elevator pitch, right? To say this is how I'm going to fulfill it. And it's interesting. Like what sort of what led you to sort of evolve your approach? And is that like a fair description? And maybe help me understand how that fits, and then also how you evolved from one approach to the next.
No, I think that's fair. I think it was kind of a natural progression just through trying stories. Lavelle did teach me a lot. Speaking of procrastinating through writing or through planning, which you had mentioned, I put in the notes is pretty much how I started my writing life. I planned Lavelle for like 6 years, but then I realized it was all stuff that I couldn't use for anything. It just didn't matter. Nothing I planned mattered. And that's kind of the world building trap that I think a lot of people can fall into, where you spend ages coming up with a currency system that's never going to affect the story, or things like that. You know, just these little details that are great, and they can help you get a better basis of what you're doing. But I think after trying a few times and then doing all of that and starting something and saying, oh, I never used that, I could have spent that time thinking about character motivations, because that's something that I actually do use to develop the story. You can kind of hone in on it a little more quickly in your next story, so you know a little more what pieces of it are going to speak to you, and so you can kind of jump into it from there. And for me, it was building character motivations and character backgrounds, because you can get a lot of backstory with something like that, and you can kind of find new ways to take your story if you kind of look a little more introspectively on your cast.
Can I dig at that for a second, Case?
Yeah, sure.
This idea of, you just said that like by thinking about your character's motivations, you can find more backstory. So is this something where you just like you intuit, oh, this is how I think this character would feel about that, and then like the question becomes, well, why do they feel about that way?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then that's something that you can build into a theme in your story. You can build it into a specific event. If you want to do a callback to something that's happened, or if you want to say, well, they have really strong feelings about their relationship with their father, so the father-child relationship is going to be a very strong theme throughout this story. And it comes up in really surprising places, but it's I just want to say it's through experience, and it's, I guess, through making mistakes and through spending a lot of time on the wrong things. Naming like entire pantheons of gods that don't matter and won't show up and things like that. You know, I feel like we've all done that. It's fun and it's good, and I think it is still an important thing to do, especially if you're starting out, to kind of cut your teeth on it. It's kind of a safe way to learn these things. But as you go, you learn that they're not going to be important in your story, and you know which ones will be and which ones will not, I think.
You know, it's funny that the world building trap gets brought up a lot in these kinds of discussions, but I'll tell you the one that I get hung up on more than that. And as a matter of fact, like when I talk with other writing friends, this is always pointed out as one of my weaknesses, that I don't think enough about world. You know, I was working on a project where magic figured into the story some way, And
Mm-hmm.
the writing partner said to me, well, what's the rules of this magic? Does it work with like words or with gesture, or is it with incantations and spells? Is it like chemistry? They have to mix things. I'm like, who cares? It's magic. They just go blah, and the magic comes out, you know?
Mm-hmm. You're like,
They're like,
yes.
you haven't thought this through hard enough. But what I get hung up on all the time is always operating out of some kind of central theme. Like I always like establish, okay, this is what it has to be about. This is the aboutness, and then it turns into this cat and mouse game of, well, it'd be really cool if this happened. Well, it doesn't really reflect the central idea that I was really going for. Time to push that away.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now to put something else in front of it, right? Whereas what I think is interesting that you're talking about, Case, is this idea of like just let the characters talk to you a little bit,
Yeah.
and that can reveal plot, right? And which
Yeah.
probably reveals theme too, I'm guessing.
I think it does. I don't like to actively go in thinking about the theme of my stories. I like to get them to a point where they're developed enough and then look back and say, what happened here while I wasn't looking? I think it's not an approach that's ever really worked for me. I think it runs the risk of becoming a little too like Aesop's fable if I tried it. I don't think I'm the type of writer that would be able to really pull that off well. I feel like it would get a little too didactic if I jumped in and was like, I'm going to do a moral story about how robots have feelings or something like that. And like I wouldn't end up with Pluto. I'd end up with something much. I'd probably end up with like the Tezuka story, the original one, which was good but still kind of heavy-handed.
Hmm.
I feel really not to say that I could write like Tezuka. That seems like a tall order, but yeah, it's just I think something that you have to leave room for natural development on things like that. But you're right. I'm also very guilty of underplanning these days. I think I've kind of gone a little too far in the other direction, and it's something that it's good to work with a collaborator sometimes because they can call you on it and say, well, I don't understand this, and you realize you've left something to assumption, and you have to sit down and kind of suss it out and make sure that you can convey your ideas to somebody else. So it can be really tricky, and I'm still figuring it out.
I want to talk about sussing things out in a second, but I want to underline this thing that you said because I think this is great, and this is going to be one of those bullet points that I hang on to for a long time. Stepping away from the writing and coming back to it and ask what happened when I wasn't looking.
Yeah.
How long? You know, generally speaking, how long do you step away from it and then before you come back to see what was going on when you weren't looking? Is it a day? Is it an afternoon?
I like to give it a little bit of space. I like to give it a couple of days. Like when I finish an outline, I'll try to leave it alone and then come back to it a few days later. Because by then you've forgotten a lot of the deeper stuff you had in mind for it. So you can look back on it and you're like, I have no idea what I was talking about here. This doesn't make any sense. So it can be good, I think, to write something and then just kind of let it set for a while. Though it can be interesting when you do leave something alone for a really, really long time. And then you come back to it, like, if you drop a story and you come back to it years later, you're like, who is this? I don't even know who this guy is. What am I going to do with this? But it kind of, it's like giving it to an editor who is your future self. So you can kind of revise your own story and take it in a different direction without having yourself there to be like, well, no, this is important because I said so. So I think...
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just as soon as you're finished, go back and reread everything you did. It doesn't even have to be you come back later. It's just review what you just wrote down, I think. So.
Rob, does this resonate with you at all? This idea of like walking away from it and coming back and reflecting on it after the cool down of creating?
Yeah, I think I think those are really good strategies, and I feel like that I'm working toward that direction where it's almost like I'm willing to trust myself as in providing more structure than I had previously. So because for me, I had come to the point where I'd think of an emotional event, almost like a scene as a piece of poetry or like just an expressive symbol, and think, holy crap, I need someone to do that. You know, like I don't know, blow something up while casting some energy through their guitar or what have you, right?
Yeah.
Or falling out of a building while playing guitar, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking of the a lot of my the public writing experience comes from the story Art Geek Zoo, The Way of Sound, and I actually was revisiting a lot of that recently, thinking of my strategies and things that I had sort of shelved as like ways to continue the story. And honestly, I think I think Casey is offering a lot of really, really sound advice to say that, well, this little bit of structure is going to help you because you're not going to get lost, getting into the almost like the safety of too much structure, where those systems and whatnot can be valuable and it can be a great workout to produce it, but yet, yeah, the world building, yeah, and it always gets picked on. And a part of that, I think, is like as we reflect on this, we end up poking at the lessons that we learned as we transitioned from one stage of practice to another stage of practice, but yet each stage of practice is fine, just as long as you're doing the thing you were setting out to do, right? And to me, that's like actually, like how long is too long? Well, if your contract with yourself for this given project is to actually put a story in your reader's hands, or to discover who those readers are, then it better involve shipping the story at some point in some portion, like bigger increments, small increments, whatever. But like, there you go, and all that can start to affect that act of that project. I mean, the like how you go about it. Like, well, if you're going to update weekly or daily or do full volume releases, whatever, each of those could be assisted by a more improvisational strategy, a less improvisational strategy. I think I am not a learned manga expert or what have you, but some that I've read, it would seem that a lot of those artists and storytellers have committed to an aggressive production schedule that I think they don't have the resources to invest in doing super in-depth backstory and what have you. And so it's more about the moment-to-moment, choices and experience and flow of events and effects and how these characters work with one another that maybe is pretty improvisational. Or maybe it's from an old notebook, but it's probably not heavily developed and whatnot in a like a Tolkien extreme example.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you always want to leave room for change and things like that. Going back to Attack on Titan, there was a translated interview with Isayama, the creator, where he mentioned he does have major points where he was like, I want this big reveal to happen in volume 10, I want this to happen here, but the rest of it is kind of open. And he admitted that he scrapped the ending. He had an ending in mind, but then the series got popular and he didn't want to do it anymore. So
I knew it. I did not check that interview, but I knew it after.
Yep.
That's so interesting. If I feel like that's very validating to hear. As I enjoyed the story, but to me, I'm like, I sensed. Oh, you pulled it. You pulled something away, right? And
yeah.
So and now that's the next chapter. This could have resolved, but whatever. Anyway.
Well, but no, I think
there's lots of resolution, but it felt like. Anyway, now I have to go find it. Where could people such as me and the listeners find that interview?
I will find it and I'll give you a link if you want to put it in the show notes.
All right, awesome.
It was a couple of months ago, I think, but I will definitely find it for you.
No worries. And I have to.
But yeah, I think so. I think everybody does that to an extent. I think staying to Lord of the Rings with your planning can hurt you because it's.
Okay, did we lose you?
It's important to be flexible, work things from people or just reactions from yourself. If you look it over later and you say, "Oh, I don't really like the way this is going anymore," you want to be able to scrap it and run with it. I think as long as you're just honest with yourself and you keep consistent with your plan, um, then I think that's fine. Like I think there's definitely a lot of merit in going full improv with a comic, just to try it. You know, take all the brakes off, just jump no net underneath you, and just see what happens. But maybe for a shorter project, maybe not for an epic webcomic that you run for years and years or something like that. But it's also worth it to fully outline a comic before you go into it. I did a couple of anthology submissions where I had to have a full page breakdown, and that's not really how I work. So it was it was a struggle. I really didn't like it. But once I had it, I was like, no, this is good. I know what I need to do. I know when I need to hit these story beats, and I can just kind of go with it. Now they didn't stay when I revised them to be longer stories, but it's still something that it's good to try both approaches, I think. But you'll probably realistically end up somewhere in the middle.
What I was going to say, I did. I've done both, right? And I've talked about this many times. Like, so when I did this graphic novel called The Front years ago, I thumbnailed the entire thing before I drew a single page, right? So I spent 2 years thumbnailing the whole book. Then I did it as a webcomic, right? And then while I was updating the front, I started doing a comic called The Replacements with a partner, Sarah Turner. And in that case, it was almost entirely improvised. And we had a general idea of premise and characters, but we did not know how it was going to end when we started. And that went on 3 years. And I think looking back, had I not had a partner to be accountable to, I don't know if I would have finished it. You know, because
I think that's really important to it.
Yeah, because like there were too many times where it was like I have no idea what I'm going to do with the book this week, right? But there was somebody to bounce off of, and there was somebody that I owed something to keep me, you know, motivated to keep going with it, right?
And I think that's where like again, like each of these projects has sort of a nature to it, depending on what you're committing to and how you're committing to it. And I think having a collaborator changes the dynamic. Having like what schedule, what sort of what is it going to, I don't know, the features of the comic. Is it going to be very interactive? Are you going to try to share your journey of making it and do a lot of, you know, background blogging and stuff? And I don't, all these things like just form a different, I don't know, different things to commit to and experience as you're making it.
I want to back up to two things that I heard you guys both talking about at different points, and I want to maybe quickly address these before we get to on the ground stuff. But earlier, both of you guys kind of addressed this issue of packaging and communicating your plot idea, right? Being able to like when you said earlier, Case, about like what happened here when I wasn't looking. And coming back and looking at it and like trying to make sense of it, or looking at older stuff and going like, what is this? This doesn't communicate anything to me. Who is this character? How do you guys think about when you're plotting something? Do you think about as you're working how you would package this up into not a premise elevator pitch, but summarizing the plot clearly to somebody? And to bookend this question, there's this writing advice that I heard recently, and I forget where I heard it, and I hate that I couldn't remember or look it up where I heard this to give proper attribution, but I think it was the Stuff Said podcast, stuffsaidshow.com. They said don't start writing your story until you know the ending, right? And here we talk about Attack on Titan. You had an ending, change the ending. But and when I hear that, what I'm hearing in that advice is be able to succinctly do the TV guide, you know, log line for your plot. Do you guys think about that when you're working on this kind of stuff?
Sometimes. I don't like the idea of knowing the ending. I do like the idea of giving the TV guide synopsis, because they usually don't give away the ending in the TV guide version or the Netflix short summary or something like that, because it does give you that flexibility to kind of move around with it. It's good to have an idea of where you want to end it, but I don't think you should know for sure necessarily. I don't think you have to know for sure. If you have a point to move towards, you can go off course and do something a little bit different. And I think it's important to kind of leave that open. But having something is still better than having like a big blank page, I think. You just want to end that sentence, I think, even if you end up deleting half of it and writing something in its stead. I feel like I changed my message halfway through that too.
No, it's
so see, it's important to keep your endings open.
Exactly. So what in the case of composing your story and also in composing your answer to that, you have agency as a writer to keep revising.
Yes. Thank you. That's what I meant to say.
No, see, it just keeps happening.
Yeah.
No, like if it weren't for revisions, I don't know if I would ever have been comfortable in the process that I came up with, like, because taking enough time to step away, I was able to just start to get better at critiquing my own progress toward that log line, that thing, and then even to discover, like, well, gosh, that's missing. Because when I started out, when I started out plotting Arctic Zoo, I went nuts on the world for a few months, and then I completely scrapped it, and then I just started doing it. And but along the way, I scrapped a little too much, and I found that I felt like that promise that I liked what you said, Casey, about it being an open thing. That for me, what I ended up exploring my own, like, why do I care about serial entertainment and whatnot, kinds of things, and like, how could I bring that into this work? And I realized that it's those open questions, or almost like an enticing commitment that inherently has this openness to it, that, oh, that's what I'm trying to do generally, and I can tell people that without revealing what I'm, where I'm going, because actually I don't know where I'm going entirely, but I'm roughly committing to do it in this way in general. So they can serve one another. But I also, I can really respect the other strategy that I explored, but just didn't feel right, because it would be like, don't tempt me, Frodo, I'm going way close to world building. Is the whole Robert McKee style of where he says, like, I characterize his approach is he's like a story architect, where he's really looking to have, like, the positive and negative energy change from scene to scene and act to act, and overall story arc to overall story arc, where as the energy changes from the protagonist being in a tough position to a good position to a tough position, good position, and the antagonist and whatnot kind of being a mirror of that. But and I'm like, that's just too many variables to manage with. That's too strict to me. Like, I didn't feel like I could commit to that. But I respect it, and I just see, like, that could totally be super empowering to writers that just have that approach.
You're talking about Robert McKee, who wrote the book Story?
Yeah, Robert McKee. Yep, Story.
Put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I listened to the audiobook, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, just to,
Well, okay, I'll tell you what's making me feel better right now, listening to both of you guys talk about this, is that, yeah, I've listened to things like Robert McKee's books, I forget some of the other ones, and then things like Pixar's 22 Rules of Storytelling come out, and they're all really good questions to ask yourself, or things to, like, waypoints or checkpoints to look in on your story, like when you look at Pixar's 22 Rules. But there's a romance, and I know I use this word a lot, but there's a romance surrounding this idea of things being perfectly structured. Like, I just saw somebody posted a blog post a couple weeks ago about how RoboCop, the movie, the old one, is like, it's perfectly symmetrical, and they lined up all the scenes in the film to show that, like, oh, the part when Murphy is getting killed, by Clarence Boddicker and the bad guys is the moment when RoboCop is killing Clarence Boddicker and the bad guys, and the moment when Officer Lewis says to RoboCop in the hallway, "Murphy, it's you," it happens at exactly the same moment on the other end of the movie, from the middle point to where she takes off his mask and he's kind of coming into touch with his humanity again. And like, you read these things and it's like, oh my gosh, these people are, like you said, Rob, they're like architects. They're like the most grandiose architects of all time. They're making this majestic thing with all this intricate interlacing structure, and that can bewilder you into thinking that it's not done until I've got that structure in place. But what I'm hearing and what you guys are saying is sometimes that structure is something that reveals itself through the act of doing it, and your brain's doing it without you knowing that it's doing it. Does that sound fair to say?
It does. That also reminds me, I don't know if either of you have read Film Crit Hulk's book, Screenwriting 101. I would highly recommend it. And I feel a little bad bringing this into your house, Jersey, but they spend a lot of time tearing apart things like the hero's journey or the 3-act structure, and mention that they are good things to use as analysis, but not necessarily as a writing tool, because you can get too caught up in falling into that structure and saying, oh, well, this has to happen now because that's when the rising action happens. And so they spend a lot of time saying, like, well, this was created to look at things that already exist. It wasn't created for you to use as a checklist to go down. But the most important rule, I think, from that book was to ignore everything that it said. Just to say, just pick up the pieces of this that stuck out to you and use those. Don't sit down and memorize this book. You don't even have to listen to me. You can use the 3-act structure if you want. It's just, don't feel so tied to formalism, I think it was kind of the message of it. And that's something that struck a chord with me, because I am not really a big fan of formalism, I think, in a lot of ways. So.
Well, it sounds like I would enjoy the pedagogical style of that book.
I think you should check it out. The only part that I did not like, and luckily there is another version, when you buy the book, you're basically buying the same book twice, because the first part of it is written in all caps, like Hulk, and that was completely unreadable to me. It was awful. But luckily there is a Bruce Banner version, which is in proper casing, so you can read it like a normal human being. I was like, I can't do this. It's only an ebook. It's on Amazon. But
what is it called again? Or who wrote it?
It's written by Film Crit Hulk.
Film Crit Hulk.
Who's a person that writes all caps reviews of movies and tweets and things like that. But they're a very experienced person in the film industry, and so they took everything they know about film and screenwriting and kind of distilled it down into a book about writing. It's just called Screenwriting 101. But I would definitely recommend it. It's something that's super helpful for all forms of writing. It's written in a way, it actually references comics in a lot of areas too. It's specifically, Film Crit Hulk. This is a person who is a comics fan. So there are some specific comics references in it. There are comic stories that are brought up, and there are a lot of video game references too. So it's a very contemporary writing guide, and it's good, I think, for any media, but it kind of goes against the idea of having a specific form to your story, and that, I think, struck me more than a lot of the writing books that I've read. But I don't think I would have gotten to that point if I hadn't read those other books in the first place. If I had come to this one first, I don't think I would have really gotten anything about it. So it's a mix. Like, I think you need to see that stuff, but you need to know that you don't need it.
Right. Well, and to be fair, there's times and places for certain kinds of structures as a creative instigator, right? It's like, well, if I put this restriction on myself, right? And I run into this when I do freelance work. Like, so I work on this Captain Seriously book. I've got 12 pages. I've got 12 pages. I've got 12 characters. or 8 characters, and I've got a theme, and I got to make all of that work somehow. And somehow I always do it. Year after year, I do it.
Yeah.
And there's something really satisfying about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is intriguing. I'll have to check this book out because I do think this is something that thinking about that structure too much that's where I get lost. I get completely bewildered and lost in the woods. It's not the world building that kills me, it's the structure that kills me.
Yeah.
So okay, I had one more thing that I heard you guys talking about that I wonder if we could address just real quick, and then we'll get to on the ground. If you're honest with the story yourself, if you're honest with yourself and the story, that's a big one. How do you know? What kind of mental, check-ins do you do? Like what have you done to remind yourself whether or not you're being honest with it? Okay, so I'll give you an example. Years ago, I created a story out of anger. This would be going back to like 1998, and I came up with this concept and this whole premise. And if anybody wants to do their homework, they can find out what it was, but it's really not important to this story. But I was sort of like this response to, I got advice from somebody that I was very angry about, and I said, oh yeah, you want to see that? Well, I'll show you that, and I'll show you it my way. And I came up with this thing that was just born out of this place. And like a writing friend said to me, it was like, oh man, you're never so funny as when you're angry, Jersey. And I did this thing, and I think I did like one issue of the thing, and then I realized, oh, I don't like being in this headspace. I don't like operating out of this rebellion to something that doesn't matter. I'd much rather write something that I actually like really believe in and feel strongly like in love with, rather than angry about. Just me personally as an author, right? I didn't realize that until I got 25 pages into the thing, right? I didn't know I wasn't being honest with myself until I was 25 pages in. So it's something that I don't worry about a whole lot, but I still worry about from time to time. Like, how do I know that this is really coming from a good place instead of like a dishonest place, or a place where I'm reacting to something or rebelling against something? Not in the good way, right? Like, where there's a difference between rebelling, saying like, I'm going to show you another way of looking at this, and then there's rebelling that say, I'm giving you the finger, right? You see what I'm saying? The difference?
Yeah.
So how do you guys check in on that? Or do you? I mean, is this something that you just feel out with your gut, or is it something where you have like some kind of way that you check in on something to make sure that it's feeling honest?
I think it has a little bit to do with I'm really curious to read that film critic Hulk book, because I'm wondering what it ends up saying about characters, because to me, like, the characters are providing you evidence. So going on the journey with them, but also just what they're saying and doing, and how they're interacting with one another. If those are if they feel like they're not distinct enough voices that somehow are just having interactions that feel that feel human enough, that feel like they're because let's see. So for instance, I actually, what's interesting, Jersey, is I don't know if you could say like, so you could do some sort of piece of art that you have a negative, journey through creating, where it's like, gosh, I was just mad about that. I don't like making things when I'm mad, but there might have been a lot of honesty in it at the same time. Like, those characters could have been representing situations that resonate with people, because they're like, I totally feel like that, and I just had a conversation like that the other day or whatever. And if you have those kinds of observations about the characters and what they're doing and saying, that's roughly what I have used to try to.
Well, okay, yeah. Let me clarify. I was only speaking for myself in that situation, right? Yeah. I'm not going to say that everybody else has to rein it in because I don't like the mad.
No, I wasn't trying to present it as if you were, but like if you're like, wow, yeah, that wasn't my favorite project because of whatever, right? That would what's interesting is I think, like for me, I think your example is independent of the approach I was describing, because I think like that art you could judge based on, for instance, it's my understanding that H.P. Lovecraft was like pretty darn racist, right? He still made some great art, right? So his intent and how he channeled it and what he made with it, they're kind of all separate things, and I think he's probably delivering he delivered quite well on his overall intent to creep people out and present them with difficult things to ponder, and the nature of how the universe is a pretty scary place.
Yeah, it's hard though when you lose that sense of. I think you always have to have a sense of detachment from it, because otherwise you to invoke this specter. Otherwise, you turn into Dave Sim, and you spend the last few volumes of your series writing giant tirades about how women destroy everything, and you're not even telling a comic anymore. You're just writing angry essays. So it's I'm
I'm
not
super
not fond of Dave Sim for
I'm not
obvious
in the
reasons.
know. What's that? Can you describe that situation, Casey? I'm sorry, I'm slightly.
Dave Sim did the series Cerebus for a very, very, very long time. It started as a Conan parody. It's a very very well known independently published comic, and it turned into him just turning into a soapbox so he could write angry essays about how women destroy everything. And it started at first. It just went down a downward spiral, but it kind of got angrier and angrier and more overt about what it was doing, and it just became very clear what his objectives were, I think. And it went from heavy-handed analogy stories into women are terrible and this is why, or things like that.
Wow.
So I think as long as you remain objective with yourself, you can write things out of a place of anger, but as soon as you lose that, you turn into a terrible person, or everybody knows you're a terrible person. I think that's really it. And it's just
You reveal your terribleness.
yeah, and it's God, a lot of places I could go with intent and terrible people and their writing, but that's a whole different show, I think. But yeah, I don't know. I think as long as you're honest about your intent and what you're doing, and to say, okay, well, I still have to give this to somebody else. I think that can keep you honest too. At least that's what keeps me honest. I've never really written anything as like a hate letter to something else. Like I've never really written anything out of anger that was like, well, we'll shoot you, or anything. But I think that's most.
I know we're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but I think it's worth going into. Is that I'm not talking about like I'll show you as in defiantly saying I will achieve my goals despite other people going, nah, I don't know, dude. You know, there's a difference between that and saying, what's with all these kids and the funny haircuts, huh? Well, that's not gonna last. That's dumb. And I'm here to tell you how dumb it is, right?
Yeah.
What's with these rollerblades? Oh, that's a fad. You know, I don't want to do that, and that's kind of the place I was operating out of when I did that thing that I was referring to. So,
I do want to point out though, like I think you are on I think it fits with this overall. Let's see, if your intent is to figure out your strengths and weaknesses and how you're plotting your story and how you're starting to execute it and whatnot, and you're looking for ways to see if it's sounding genuine enough or what have you, your biases and beliefs are going to be coming through in the characters in one way, shape, or form. Like you may find like thematic ways to, well, let's see, like for instance, there was a time when Full Metal Alchemist had a little bit of subtlety regarding its, its World War II Germany sort of ties, right? And then there was a time where it was way less subtle, right? And it's anyway. There's and maybe let's see. I don't know if that would be a good distinction. Well, your if you use your characters and your theme and well, not the theme, the scenario and what they're acting out, it doesn't have to be exactly like let's think of a, well, people use stories to process difficult events in history too, right? So maybe you're writing a story that's possibly about slavery, but it's, instead of using characters from, like, let's say American history, to convey that, you come up with an analogous scenario, and it's people on a different planet that are enslaved by visitors from another planet. Well, that's actually happened a lot. A lot of people use that, but you can still explore that theme. Maybe have dark feelings about it or what have you. But anyway,
it can be interesting.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say, in the interest of full disclosure, one of the examples I was thinking of is actually the creator of Attack on Titan, who has some very Japanese nationalist tendencies, and he has come under fire for it. And I am definitely not knowledgeable enough to really talk about this in any real capacity, but it is something that people have brought up. There are parallels in his story, but it's kind of interesting to approach that from an outsider perspective, where you don't really, I think, fully understand the analogy that's being made. But it's still, it can be interesting to see things come from a place like that, and to see how overt people get with things, and how some are different than others, I think.
Yeah, that how on the nose is it being, or is it just abstracted into some symbols that serve your story well enough that, there's plenty of different interpretations, then that maybe is a safe enough territory. I don't know if this is landing. So maybe was your story a little too on the nose?
Oh, mine?
Yeah, your Jersey. Yeah.
Maybe.
So.
What I like, what I'm hearing in this as we're picking this thing apart, is this idea that what I'm hearing, and let me throw it at you guys and see how you respond to it, is a focus on structure and detachment can easily confound us from the notion that it's got to come from an emotional place too. You got to care about this thing.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
And what you care about is going to be colored by your bias and your worldview, and that's kind of what gives you originality as an author too.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, and it's funny because here I am, this guy who teaches a class where I've instituted this as a regular thing I do in my classes now, where I use emotional cues to get the people in the classroom to build a cast. So I did this on the in one of the Lean to Art workshops, actually, one of the labs that we gotta dig up and put on the Patreon page. Where I say, like, okay, you're gonna write down the first name of your best friend in 4th grade, a relative who annoys you, somebody who bugs you for no reason, somebody you have a secret crush on or had a secret crush on. You just write the first names, and then now we're gonna write one emotion word that comes to mind whenever we think of that name. And then now we erase the names. Now we just take the emotion words. Now we're going to build a character who is based on that emotion word, right? The whole concept is about channeling your emotions to create things that you are going to be interested in. And sometimes I feel like, at least speaking for myself, this whole notion of, well, it's got to have a structure, it's got to have a really solid theme, and there should be no waste, there should be no drag. But remember Chekhov's rule, that gun is on the wall, I better use it, right? Nothing goes unused in this story. We're going to use the eyeballs, we're going to use, the back of the neck hair, all for something in this thing. And that can distract us from this notion that, well, but also you have to have your emotions invested in this thing, and you should be, as Casey, you pointed out, listening to the characters too. Gosh, there's a lot to keep track of in this writing stuff.
Yeah, there is, isn't there? It's hard. But it's fun. It's fun! I mean it!
Writing is hard, Casey.
I know, but plotting feels like discovery to me. It feels like you're discovering something that is sometimes already there, and you just have to find the right pieces of it. It's kind of like it's like creative archaeology, where you gotta find all the pieces and put it together, and it might end up being something that you didn't expect it to be, but it's going to be really cool.
I like that. I like that idea of archaeology. All right, well, we got to get to on the ground, so we got to start doing some helpy tips and talking about some strategies and methods that we use to sift through and pan for all the great ideas. So, is it cool with you guys if I cue the music and head over to on the ground?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right, then here we go. So, time to now that we've thought about this. By the way, since we had special music for Casey, I chose special music for me. That was from Transformers Animated.
Good.
So now that we thought about it really hard, we didn't come up with any solid, like, this is the best practices and this is the best way to think about it. We pointed out all the complexity of this thing. So, okay, now let's try to winnow down to a few things that, action items. End of the meeting, you have action items. What are some method strategies that you guys use to do your plotting? Casey, I want to start with you. Like, what's what are your favorite tools of choice, and like when you sit down to say, okay, I'm going to plot this thing today. I'm going to start roughing out the through line of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you use for that? Is it just pencil and paper, or is it writing in Microsoft Word? And then on top of that, the follow up to that is like, what's the conditions that you like to work in? Can you work on the subway?
Ideally, the tool of my outlining trade is just Google Drive. I just open a new document. I mean, Word would be the same, Notepad, anything like that. But I like having it so that I can pick it up anywhere if I have a moment. It's just to open a new or an existing Drive document and start writing down story beats. Rob, this is going back like 20 minutes or something. But you mentioned at one point just wanting to work in a scene where like a guitar blows something up because it's cool. Like that kind of thing. You just write that down. You say, like, I want to do this, and you put it in there, and then you connect the dots. You just start as high as you can and start to work your way down, I think, where you'd say, okay, well, I'm going to break this down into episodes. In episode 1, or whatever you want to call it, say, like, in segment 1, scene 1, whatever, ultimately, these characters are going to fight. And then you want to say, okay, well, how are they going to fight? Are they going to fight verbally? Are they going to punch each other? Okay, they're going to punch each other. What happens to lead them up to punching each other? Do I have any cool things I want them to say when they punch each other? And then you just start filling it in from there, and you just kind of throw the details in as you go, and before you know, you have something together. I think it's better to just throw everything you have and edit it later, which is something I keep teaching myself because I tend to overthink things. So it's something that I'm still learning, but it's become a really valuable tool for me, is to just put down the pieces and then connect the dots between them. So if you start big and then go small, I think it becomes less overwhelming.
So you just have like a barf document where you just like go, here's all the stuff I love.
Well, I have a lot. I can't write on the subway, but I can plan. If I'm sitting and zoning out, I actually just got a new phone. I got a phone that has a stylus, the Note 3, so I can just pop it open and scribble down an idea if I have something really quick. Yeah, I really like it. It's so great. So I can be sitting on the subway if I'm lucky enough to get a seat and say, oh, well, I want this to happen to this character, or like, what if? Because you want to be open for it. You know, those times where you're grocery shopping, you go, oh my God, this piece just fell into place and I wasn't even thinking about it.
Yep.
Or for me, it's when I'm trying to fall asleep and I can't, and I keep waking myself up to take notes. I've woken up to notes that I didn't remember taking before, and they are barely comprehensible, but they'll be really good ideas. I'll be like, oh, okay, I worked this out while I was trying to convince myself to fall asleep.
Okay,
so it's
this
good.
is slightly tangential, but
Yeah.
as a guy who has a tablet with a stylus and which runs the same operating system that you're using, what's your favorite idea capturing note-taking app?
I've just been using S-Note so far. I think I want to try Evernote. My coworker was telling me about setting it up to sync with, but I just kind of use it like I'm writing on Post-its, and then I open them up, and I like the idea of having to transcribe them because it makes me organize them into things that make sense. I used to just type up notes in the like Notepad app on my iPhone, and they would just be jumbled messes. It would be a whole bunch of them in one, and then I would say, okay, well, I need to take this to my outline and make it into a thing that makes sense. And the act of that can sometimes generate new stuff. And even if it doesn't, you just put it all down and come back to it later when you have other ideas. Although if you're too disorganized with it and you have too many files, you end up having the same idea 3 different times, and then you have to reconcile which version of it you like the most, but that can kind of help you sometimes too. I definitely do that a lot, where I forget I've written something.
What's funny about what you just described is I just did a 12/12 comic for the first time in a long time, like probably 5 years, right? And for those, since it's been so long, I should explain what it is. The 12/12 comic is when Anne and I and a friend sit down with a 6-panel grid, and we take 3 random headlines from the New York Times, and we take 3 random objects from a bag, and we give ourselves like 2 hours to turn that into a story somehow. And what's fun about it is that because of all the creative restrictions of, well, I got to use this Playmobil guy that I pulled out of the bag, and I got to use this hippo that I pulled out of the bag somehow, and I got to have it tie in with this headline about Handel's Messiah playing at the symphony tonight. You discover new things about your writing. Like, and the thing I always found out, that I was always surprised by when I did those 12/12 comics, is all my stories turned out to be really dark. Like a lot darker than I'm used to working. But I did one for the first time in a long time, and it was refreshing. It was fun to try to sort out all that stuff again. And it sounds like doing that is kind of exercising the same muscles that you're doing when you're just capturing things that you think are cool and then connecting them, right?
Yeah. I do want to say I think there's a very big and important difference between structure and constraints. Constraints, I think, are an excellent way to generate ideas, like you were saying, of saying, well, it has to involve this hippo, and it has to involve this headline from a newspaper. I think that's something that is completely different than saying I have to follow the hero's journey structure, or I have to make this a 3-act. I mean, that can be a constraint in itself, but I think coming up with your own constraints can be more interesting. And that is the one type of comics formalism that I think I really did enjoy. I took an entire class where Matt Madden, actually, who is a very big proponent of comics formalism, would basically give challenges to us, and we would have to do them. So I did a comic, and I didn't end up liking any, but I did like the idea of going through it. Like, I didn't end up with any final projects that I really enjoyed, but we had to adapt a form of poetry into a comic. Where you had to take the actual structure of the poem and make it into a comic. Not say like, oh, take this poem and turn it into a comic. It's like,
right, you got to use iambic pentameter, right? Was this Matt Madden?
Yeah. I'm sorry?
Was this Matt Madden who was teaching this class?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And then the last one was to pick our own constraints, and I did a comic that had to be formatted as a Fibonacci spiral, which was really hard. And did not turn out as well as I hoped it would, but it was cool to think about. I had to, the comic pages, I swear had to be, I had to buy an entirely new piece, brick of paper. It was probably about the size of my desk, because the page was a Fibonacci spiral, and the proportions of it were going to be to scale to the numbers in the Fibonacci sequence. So I had 1 by 1. Yeah, it was terrible. I don't know what I was thinking. It was fun, but it did not turn into a good comic. So it would be a bunch of panels where I had, like, what is it? 1 by 1, 1 by 1, 2 by 2, 5 by 5, 8 by 8, and a 13 by 13 panel. So the biggest panel on the page was 13 inches by 13 inches. And so it was an interesting exercise, and it was fun to go into it with a constraint. But maybe don't expect great results all the time if you do something like that. Do it more as thought exercises, maybe. I found that I don't work well like that.
Even taking out the whole value judgment of like which we prefer, I just love this distinction you made that there's a difference between structure and constraint.
Hmm.
That's terrific. Oh my gosh, you have no idea how much that helped me, Casey.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that helped. But yeah, no, seriously, I think it is important to make that difference because constraints are something that you can put on yourself, or there's something that, like you mentioned before, a freelance assignment could put on you to say, well, it has to be this long, it has to have these characters, it has to be in this particular style, or something like that. And if you think of that as, okay, well, challenge accepted, I can work with this and I'm going to do something with it, then I think there's a lot more. It's more exciting to go into it like that, I think, uh, than to think of it like, well, I have to do this, so I'm going to just structure it the way it needs to, and it's going to be this
I need to have an
many.
older character walk in and say, "Guess what? You're very alone and special." And
Yeah, see?
there's this prophecy, you see, right?
Yeah. So
Rob,
I
I'm
think,
curious what capture and organizational tools you use. Is it as simple as Google Docs or
Yeah,
S-Note?
I mean, essentially, I do primarily begin with text, and it's actually super similar to the process that Casey outlined. And I've explored different tools over the years. I played around with using like Scrivener and Evernote. Actually, I mean, I've got piles of notes from different chapters in Evernote, but uh, and I've explored like outline organizational tools as well, such as Omni Outliner and let's see, iThoughts HD on the iPad and stuff. But
mhm.
what uh, what essentially I ended up landing on that I felt most productive with was just super similar to what Casey you described,
Mhm.
where I got these key moments that represent these like I want this a character in this situation, or these characters in um, having to you know uh, these characters getting kidnapped by a battle axe shaped bass guitar, and
Mhm.
and then everyone else saying like now what, and let these other characters who didn't have the chance to be in the spotlight as much to now start dealing with situations and whatever. Anyway, so I'll have that, and I'll like capture the ideas, and maybe like once in a while go into prose where if I really think like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, this is when this guitar playing penguin is walking down the road and he picks up an acoustic guitar and he looks up and there's a car barreling down the road after him. I have this scene etched in my brain. I've been playing with it for years. I've never really, anyway, and that's never made it into the story yet, but
Mhm.
but the idea is capture the big beats and start breaking them down into
Yeah.
like this flow of moments, which quickly I try to throw into who's there and they talk, and then they as they start talking to one another, I figure out, oh, this is a page, and then this is a page, and then this is a page, roughly, right? And then all of a sudden I have a point. What I ended up coming up with is this uh, the thing I call the story molecule. And actually, I outlined all this approach in something we did have offered as a Lean into Art workshop called Writing and Drawing Serial Comics, The Dramatic Reveal. Um, and it so for me, so like comic molecule had to do with I wanted to reveal some aspect of the world. I wanted a humorous moment, and I wanted a dramatic moment, and that was like my contract every page. And I wanted to leave an open question at the end of every page because that allows me to link these things together. And but I arrived at that for me when I got to that sort of development in like, oh, this is a page, and like that became like an actual solid page, because sometimes they would get grouped together and cut and edited until it became that, and then that's when I knew like, oh, I could thumbnail this now because
Mhm.
you know this is living up to that sort of place. I didn't know how I would get there, but I was going to march there in this outlining and churning iterative approach that for me takes, I don't know, perhaps 2 billion drafts. but I never won. At least 2 to 2 billion drafts,
Roughly.
roughly. Yeah.
Does that match your the scope of your editing, Casey?
I think so. I don't know. I think honestly, I don't like to do new drafts a lot, unless somebody else makes me do it. Like which is why I kind of rely on other people to look at what I'm doing and say, well, do you see anything in this I should change? Because I get really bad at noticing what I need to revise. I spend a lot of it thinking over it in my head. So when I finally put it on paper, I'm like, that's it, I'm done. I finished it, which is usually not true. But I've kind of conditioned myself to a point where I feel like once I do put it on paper, it's the final draft, because all the other drafts happen in my head, which I think might actually be. I've been having a lot of trouble getting things into thumbnail form recently, and I think that might kind of tie to it, like because it feels a lot more finished, I think, and it's harder to redo it, and it's harder to picture it in your head, or at least I've kind of lost the ability to picture it in my head to an extent. So writing dialogue or writing it in prose style or something like that tends to come to me more easily, where thumbnailing used to be. I used to work almost entirely in thumbnails, and at some point it's reversed itself, and I'm really confused. I'm still confused by this. I distinctly remember large chunks of Lavelle that I thumbnailed them, and I said, oh, I'll figure out the dialogue later. I just want to get these particular beats down. And somewhere I completely reversed that, and I'm like, okay, I have the dialogue, but I don't know what to do with this page. I don't know where to put these things, and I don't know where I'm going with that either. But it's something that has kind of, I think, changed, and I wonder if it's because I've changed the way that I'm doing my outlining.
Well, I have a question. So for me, I think I explore creative process often, and I think that you go from I think different people have different paths that feel comfortable going from conceptual to concrete.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like there's maybe there's something there as far as there's like for me, I felt like I arrived at like this is becoming concrete when it's like, oh yeah, I'm feeling this page, it's living up to these this sort of checklist, right? And then it felt concrete. Then it felt harder to change after it felt more concrete.
Yeah, it could be.
There's two things I'm thinking of as I'm listening to both of you guys. Is one is I'm reminded of some advice that and again, I think this was Scotty Young on Greg Schiegel's Stuff Said show. I'm quoting it a lot, folks, so it must be a good podcast. He said something about how he doesn't share his stories before he starts working on them because that takes some of the life out of it. Once he's told somebody about it, the story's told, it's done. I think Scotty Young said that. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But I've heard this from other people too, is this idea like if you share it, if you concretize it too soon, you feel like it's not as powerful anymore. You're not as excited about it anymore. Now, I don't know if I personally feel that way about my own work. But what I am hearing is this sense of the moment it's thumbnailed, it's kind of concretized. It's kind of like there's no turning back at this. I've committed a certain amount of effort and time, and it's going to be difficult to redo that, right? And let's face it, thumbnailing is an incredibly intellectually grueling part. I would argue it's actually the hardest part of the process of making comics for me.
What's frustrating for me personally is it used to be the easiest part, and it has become the hardest part.
But what's funny for me is that for me, I don't feel like the thumbnails are the final word. Like it's definitely the hardest part. It's where I do the most work, but I always feel like all of this is subject to change when I get the final, right? I'm probably going to stay close to this, but if I need to change like this whole thing when I get to final, I'm not going to cry about it because that's what needs to be done to make it a good thing. So fascinating. I just think it's interesting to draw those different points of view on it. It's not like say like which way is the prescription here, right?
Yeah.
But
for me, actually, what I ended up finding that I mean, again, it's different motivations. Like I was updating Art Geek Zoo like a page at a time, and it wasn't really final until because I still would revise, but it just would be less severe, the revisions. They would be adjustments in panel, or oftentimes becoming less wordy in word balloons and stuff. Embellishments, emphasis, stuff like that would be just continuing to show up right till the end. But but I did feel like I don't know, that's certainly a model. Like if you have this mental model of this is what comic storytelling is, then it's kind of like once it's final in this form, it's final, and I may waste something if I share it before that. But for me, I felt more like I was performing the story and coming up with new versions of it for just a subset of a few people who were willing and interested to hear me bounce ideas once in a while. So it was like a new performance.
This discussion is reminding me of something that I actually had in my notes for when we do the Lead into Art episodes, where we break down my whole experience working on the Warren Commission report book. Is that one of the things that happened in that process that really kind of shook the wheels off my wagon and made me realize there's a whole other way to think about this? Is I was thumbnailing the pages, right? So I'm doing like a pencil sketch of the page, and then I would give those thumbnails to Ernie Colon to draw the characters while I drew the backgrounds. And sometimes not a lot of communication would happen in between that transaction. And so suddenly I'd get a set of inks where Ernie would say, "Oh yeah, well that layout was really, or this panel was laid out really poorly, so I just fixed it." And he completely changed the camera angle. He completely changed, like the arrangement of the characters and like the depth of the shot. And here I was with the background already drawn. I'm like, "Oh crap, I got to redraw the background on this." Then I looked at what Ernie did, and I'm like, "Oh, but that is way better." And now it doesn't work with the rest of the composition of the page, so I'm gonna have to move this, I'm gonna have to do it. And so the page became this very living thing to me while I was working on this book. As stressful as that was, it made me realize that the page is a living organism that, if I need to move these things and mutate this organ to make it do something else, so be it, as long as it gets me a good looking page. And we were making those kinds of little tweaks and adjustments right up until the end of the deadline. So the takeaway that I got out of that whole experience was that thumbnailing it, as difficult as that is, that's the beginning of life. That's not the end of life, right? It's not I haven't finished yet, because there's so much more mutation that needs to happen here before it's finished. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I feel like I've kind of had an epiphany here for why thumbnailing has gotten really tough for me. I've been thumbnailing mostly for other people recently. So, and I haven't been involved in the final art. So for me, the thumbnailing is the last step. And I think that's kind of why I'm like, well, I've got to make this count. I've got to really do it. And I mean, not to say that I'm really strict about it. With Parasite Nights, for example, Lindsay will. I've had times where I'm like, I don't know what to do with this panel. And so I'll just give it to her with a blank panel, and she'll be like, okay, well, I'm going to do this because I know what I want to do with it, or I'll give something, and she'll be like, no,
it's a panel with you just drawn going, huh? I don't know.
Practically. I've practically done that, and I feel really bad about it, but I'll have times where I'm just like, I gave you the dialogue, figure it out from there. And yeah, or there'll be times where it changes, and that's, yeah, I think since that's kind of my last step, and that might be it. And I think that's kind of why I've been agonizing over the short story that I'm doing with my friend Justin, where I have to. That's it. Like I mean, I will have more involvement in the art of that one, but I've been like, I've got to make these thumbnails really good. So I don't know. I have to stop worrying about it, I think. That's it. Just do it. Just do it like I used to.
I think that's the number one takeaway for this whole discussion, is stop worrying about it and just enjoy doing it, if at all possible.
Yeah, you're right.
No, but I think that was what, because Rob, we were talking a lot off mic during the whole process when I was on deadline on that Warren Report book, and I think part of our discussion was like how not stressed I seemed during the deadline, as tough as it was, right? To the
Oh,
point
yeah.
where you even said, like,
How
are
you
you
doing,
doing something
buddy?
about this?
How you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, where I was like, are you okay? Because you seem okay, which makes me worry. But I think part of what made that deadline so manageable was that letting go. When instead, because there was no time to fight over the
Yeah.
page, right? So it turned into, the page became this living thing that my job was to work with its energy, interpret its energy, figure out where it needs to go, and get it as close to where it wanted to go as possible, and not be so focused on the, okay, it's done, it's finalized, it's crystallized, and this
Yeah.
is perfectly laid out and structured, and my genius will be evident for everybody. I don't know. Did I say things
that
there?
totally resonates. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
this can be just overgeneralization, which I'm certainly commonly guilty of, but it reminds me of, like, thematically of a lot of what a lot of people in a variety of development and creative disciplines are noticing. It's like going from tight specification to more of a hypothesis and intent is a more robust approach overall, where it affords you to the ability to make new observations and adapt. And I think we're talking about things that are resonating with that.
All right.
Roz is-
Well, I want to respect everybody's time. So, what do you guys? I think we all agree that getting feedback from some kind of outside source is helpful in this process, right?
Yeah.
And the great thing about doing a webcomic is, like, once you're underway, even if you're making up some of it as you go along, you start getting feedback from readers. And I know I've told the story before of how, like, there are parts of some of my online or my webcomics where they were new scenes that were never meant to be there, but they were informed by a reader question. They ask a simple question about the nature of something in my story. I was like, you know what? I never thought about that. Thanks for the question. I'm writing a new scene.
Yeah.
But for those who are writing something ahead of time, right, working on a pitch, or you want to write the whole thing in advance before you put it online, who do you show it to? Do you show it to mom? Do you show it to, the guy sitting next to you on the subway? Who do you go to for feedback on this kind of thing?
Writing peers. If you can find other people who are also interested in what you're doing, or doing the same thing, kind of, those are the people whose opinions I trust the most. The people who I know think about things the way that I do, in terms of writing, and are kind of on the same page for that, and it becomes kind of a mutual thing to say, like, oh, I'm working on this thing. I treat it like mutually trading spoilers with people. Like, friends of mine who do webcomics, and I'll tell them that I'm going to tell them a big spoiler for the comic, and then they'll tell me a big spoiler about their comic that they're still trying to work out. So it feels like a fair trade, where you can say, like, well, I'm going to spitball my ideas, but you're also free to spitball any ideas you have too, and we'll work them out together. So I think building that kind of rapport with people is really, really important, because you'll get a different perspective on it, and you'll have people who have different concerns and different focuses than you will say, well, I really like this character that you never think about. Did you ever think about doing something with this? Or like, this resonated with me, and you had kind of thrown it in there as an aside, and so it can force you to focus on things that you wouldn't normally look at. But yeah, just find other people who are doing what you're doing, which, that's basically what the internet's for. So get out there and talk to people, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, this actually, for more on this very topic, we did an episode with Dave Roman and Brandon Dayton, didn't we, Rob? Where it was all about critiquing and feedback, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and no, that's great advice, Casey. Where it reminds me of like what some of what Natalie Goldberg in Writing Down the Bones, where she mentions essentially finding a writing group or forming a writing group. And sometimes that may be a specific comics writing group, but any group of writers. You're swapping stories, and chances are, you're sharing a similar enough mission, and are finding a safe environment to be vulnerable and critique, but then hopefully grow together as you critique, and not just jump into Fight Club and spitting your book's teeth out as you walk away, going, why?
Yeah, and I think it becomes easier to gauge when you will trust somebody's opinion. You want somebody whose opinion you trust, but not somebody who's going to agree with you all the time. I think that's the best. And I don't know, it works really well for me because I really like hearing other people's stories too, and I like being able to shout my 2 cents about it and say, well, I like this guy, and you should do something with that. And I mean, it probably doesn't have much to like. I'm not thinking I'm weaving puppet master strings and changing the story to be what I want it to be. But I genuinely like hearing other people's ideas too. So for me, it's a win-win. Like I love being on either side of that. So.
Well, no, this is what Dave and Brandon were talking about. Is they were saying that when they are giving critiques of other people's work, they parenthetically throw in there that what I'm really saying here is this is how I would do it.
Yeah,
right? And getting that response, as long as it is taken in that spirit, then it can be enormously helpful because you can throw away anything you don't want to use. But if something's like, that's a really good idea, I should totally take that, and then you do.
Yeah.
Best.
Yeah, I get it can be kind of scary to jump out there, and when you use the word critique, I think some people get a little defensive because some people don't know how to give critique, and some people don't know how to take critique. So it can be very, very hard to run into that. But I think as you go, this is one of those things, like it's not helpful for me to say, I don't know, you'll find people, but that's just kind of what happens. Like as you interact with the community, you find people who you don't have to say, well, I'm just saying this is a critique and you can take it or leave it, because they know that's what you mean when you say, like, I don't know why this character is here, or something like that. And you can be more honest with it without having to worry about padding what you're saying to an extent, I think.
Yeah, it's you can if your intent is to find people who you're on a similar enough journey making things, then you'll find them online or around in a local group. I mean, that's there's like, is there? Well, let's see where would be a good way. Like, I know we did go into this in the episode with Brandon and David, but like if you had to guide, a friend of yours asked Casey, or someone who was more of or maybe not quite a friend, an acquaintance, or they're a follower on Twitter, and they're like, hey, where can I go to get some good feedback on my story? Like, where would you go if you were starting?
Yeah, if I had to start over, I'm trying to think. I feel like, well, for me it was a little different because I had classmates. So if you, I think that can be a really important resource if that's something that you have access to. If you don't, I think internet communities can be really good for that if you are starting cold.
Online classes too, right? I mean, that's absolutely. Really good point. Guaranteed, there's going to be
If you have a common goal and you have the same objectives with the people, that can be one of the greatest unifiers, I think. And that can be especially good too if you have a large group of people, because you can narrow down the people who you feel like you work with best, and then you can kind of build a relationship with them and say, oh, well, I have another personal project and I want to ask your opinion about this, and we can like talk about ideas for stories together. So if you've got a group of like 20 people, maybe 3 or 4 of them really kind of get you, I guess, and then you can just kind of go from there, I think, because you're not going to really click with everybody in a large group, but it's important to just try it and to get out there and watch other people's discussions. I think if you're looking at online communities, though, it's important to find ones that are constructive.
Oh yeah.
Just it it goes really far in either direction when you just jump into like random internet forums. It's incredibly frustrating to me to see people who are afraid to give critique. And I get it. Like I completely get it. It's really really easy to have what you're saying be misinterpreted. But I think some people get so scared of other people taking their critique personally, and I think so many people take critique personally that it can really affect. I've seen creative forums. This happened recently. I was looking at like a game forum, and they had basically banned critique unless you specifically had a signature that said honest critique encouraged. Otherwise, you could not say a thing that was like, I think your writing in this is a little weak, or like, I think the art assets are a little, they're a little stiff, or something like that. You could not say that unless they specifically had a signature that said that they allowed it, and that drove me crazy. I could not deal with that because it's just creating kind of a really false environment. So I think knowing how to recognize things like that and to just jet out when you see that and find something, because you will find somewhere else. There are tons of places that you can check. I don't know. Like I personally really like talking to people on Twitter about ideas. Twitter, I think, for me, ended up being a really good community for that. But it might not be for everybody. It might be something where you find people on Tumblr who want to talk to you about it, or you find people in like an online forum or something.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's a lot of really good. Those are a lot of awesome ideas as far as just ways to. What I'm hearing is those are find different places to reach out and know what may not know what you're looking for, and you're going to find it, right? So
Yeah.
if you're looking for the extra gentle handling, you could find that. If you're looking for some harsh critique, you can find that. But,
yeah.
That's cool.
But it does require, I mean, this is all just due diligence that we have to do in pursuing something vigorously.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In a way, like this is like, I mean, big companies go through this. They do market research to say, hey, is this going to be a good hit or whatever? How do we make what we're making better?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's everyone does this kind of thing.
Gosh, guys, I got a feeling we're going to have to do this one again because we're almost at 2 hours, and I don't feel like we've really covered it as thoroughly as I would have liked. That's crazy.
And you know what? It's okay to leave open questions.
Yeah.
You know what?
End each page with an open question so people will come back for the next one. So,
There you
hey,
go.
you want to know the answers? Do you, leaners listening, do you really want to know what is the ultimate way to plot your comic? Tune in next time, right?
The answer may surprise you.
No, actually, if we do it by modern standards, we have to say, and the answer will blow your mind.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
I listened to the 15-minute mark, and then I went to the bathroom in my pants, something like that. I wouldn't say it that way, but...
Excellent pull quote.
Is that how like a 6-year-old says it? So Casey, thank you so much for making time to do this with us. This was so fun.
Yeah, anytime.
Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome to have you back.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'd love to have you back as often as possible. And everybody who listened to this today or watched it and enjoyed what Casey had to contribute to the discussion, I know I did. A great way to say thanks is to go check out wintersandlavelle.com or go to parasitenights.com. Follow up Casey on the Twitters, Space Case with a K.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say, here's my review of Casey's Twitter presence. It's one of the reasons I log into Twitter. There's a lot of stuff that I don't care for there, but I know that when I see
on my Twitter.
No. I mean,
I was like, I know I've been talking about sports anime a lot recently.
Ad hoc critique. No offense. No.
I mean, I'm I go to Twitter and I'm like, oh, there's more of that stuff. But then I see Casey's avatar pop up. I'm like, okay, this is going to be delightful. I know I'm going to be happy.
She's super funny. Got to follow Casey on Twitter. And
make Twitter
we'll
worthwhile.
Get haunted by intriguing anime recommendations from time to time. Unless you have
I'll bring him. I'll
time
bring
to
him.
watch them right away, but which that means more power to you.
Yeah.
But and also when she gets angry and starts writing in all caps, that's the best.
Yes.
I actually write in all caps when I'm excited.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Well, I don't mean like
Little
really
both,
angry.
little both.
Like when you get really angry, then the punctuation usually drops. But
Yeah.
when it's all caps, it's like this is Casey being like enthusiastically fired up and sometimes / angry about something.
Yeah. A little both. It's getting a little crispy.
But is there anything else I missed, Case, that you wanted to promote or make some noise about?
Not yet, but when I do have something else, trust me, you'll hear about it.
All right, come back on the show.
I got some stuff in the pipeline.
Sweet.
Will do.
Okay, Rob, is there anything we need to make some noise about besides the Lean Into Art Patreon, where people can support the show for as little as $1 a month and get some extra stuff?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that, and it's like, well, if you're enjoying this and you would like to spread the word about it, to show your appreciation, you could support us in a monetary way by going to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/leanintoart, and there's also other options as well, where if you're seeing this on YouTube, give us a thumbs up there, or if another way to get the word out about podcasts still is the iTunes iTunes podcast section. So look us up there as Lean Into Art and give us a star rating. And it's a great way to spread the word, and we always appreciate that.
We absolutely do. So thanks everybody for watching, and listening. And thanks once again to Casey Van Heist of wintersandlavelle.com and parasitenights.com. Until next time, everybody, I have been Jersey Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jersey on Twitter.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart. And you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right. I'm going to kill the stream, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yay, thanks for hanging out. Good night.